When you want to start scything, you will need a scythe. And many people tells me they already have a scythe, especially here in Sweden, and then it's an old scythe in the barn. And I've collected a couple of examples from that here. And at the end of the video, I will also try to mow with a couple of those we just found in the barn, just as they are, and you will see how I, as a professional, can perform. In front of me like this, put on this blade just before. To compare the Snath, I break this down into 6 key parameters. They are the height of the upper handle, how the handles are placed on the Snath, the shape of the handles, the rotational stiffness, the weight, and the ability to easily remove the blade and to adjust the hafting angle. This is the Austrian Snath, and it is the best-selling Snath around the world right now. It's available in very many countries, as well as in our webshop. They are available in 5 different heights, and there are many options for adjusting the handles. So starting off with the height of the upper handle. No matter what expert you ask, they will probably recommend you that it should be somewhere between your armpit and your chin. With the scythe mounted on an Austrian Snath, I recommend you around the shoulder point height, or maybe a little bit lower. It's always easier to start lower and then raise the handles. The recommended height of the upper handle might also differ a little bit between scythe models, but not much. Parameter 2, the position of the handles. I like this really much with the Austrian Snath. You see, when I stand like this in a mowing position, I'm really relaxed in the shoulders. They are more or less parallel, and the blade is actually reaching the ground while I'm standing like this. Parameter 3, the design of handles. What I think is really important regarding this is that you can work with more or less straight wrists. That you, when you hold them in your basic position, your wrists is strong and more or less straight. And when holding an Austrian Snath like this, you see the wrists are pretty straight and pretty relaxed. The drawback is when you encounter a stone, for example, or when you are mowing in tricky areas, when you need to have the blade like this. You see, when I really angle the wrists, and this is a super uncomfortable position. What I need to learn is to take this grip instead on the Snath, and then I have a much better position. Number 4, the weight of the Snath. A classical material to do wooden Snath is in ash, and ash is a pretty heavy wood, but there is also a little bit the difference between each individuals. Some are lighter and some is a little bit heavier. In the normal Austrian Snath, it's around 1 kilo or just less. The weight of the Snath is important, as a lighter Snath will be much easier to change direction on, and you will change direction a few times during a working day like this. But there's always a compromise. If you have super lightweight in wood, the durability will be lower. So I would say the weight of the Austrian Snath is just about the average weight you will can expect from a wooden Snath. But as all the heights of the different models in the Austrian Snath are made in the same dimension, I would say that the lower dimension, the shorter dimensions, is a little bit oversized. So if you dare, you can carve off a little bit to a more rounder shape, and then you will have a lighter Snath, but it's on your own risk, of course. Number 6, how the blade is attached to the Snath. I would say this is a really good and modern solution. Only drawback is that this metal plate here not extends all the way to the tip, which means that in the long run you can have the scars here when the blade is eating a little bit inside the wood, but that's if you use it a lot. And also you see there will be a little bit of a gap here as this metal plate protrudes more than the wood, so it's not really evenly attached the tang to the wooden snath. But the general thing is that yeah, we have this plastic part that reduces the pressure from the ring into the wood, and the ring here is rounded as the snath, so the pressure will be really even here. And then we have two Allen keys here that is screwed right on the tang. So when they are screwed like this, you can very easily adjust the hafting angle, and when you have a good hafting angle, then you are just screw them like this, and you can screw them really hard until this is really firmly attached, and then it will stay there. And this attachment ring is a little bit wider. We can pull back the ring below this hole here. So you hold the ring here, attach the blade, and come up with a ring. And that's a really nice solution. Okay, so now we come to the Nordic Snath, and here I really must admit that I'm really part of this case because I have designed this myself during 20 years of professional mowing, and every year I have adjusted a little bit on this model. I am really satisfied with this one. I think it's the best, but of course I also sell it. I got some influences from some old varieties of Swedish Snath, but then developed it in my own way. The unique thing really is this wing that you can have above the underarm. So when you're taking the stroke, you control the tip by only moving your entire underarm, and it's not just into your wrist. Also, it has a little bit a point here, and that's because when you are honing, this point goes straight into the soil, so it sticks there. The snath itself is steam bended, so we get the curves we like to raise up the lower handle. So you can spare this right hand for just pulling down and pushing forward. The height of the upper handle. This snath is made into 16 different heights, so there is always one option for you. There is also on both the lower and upper handle 3 options for small calibrating of the height. On this snath, I recommend to have the upper handle just above your shoulder joint when the blade is attached to the snath. So positioning of the handles. Here we have solved the problem of having the lower handle too low by steam bending the snath so that the lower handle is actually proportionally raised. And when you see, when I'm standing like this, the blade is attached to the ground when I'm relaxed here. And also why we are steam bending is, of course, if you just saw this model out of a plank, you will cut through the fiber. Now we can get the fibers all along and then steam bend it after that, so that it will make it much more stronger. The design of handles. I could talk an hour of this, but I just try to take it briefly. They don't have one single point that we can hold them, but you can rotate like this, so you see it doesn't need to totally change grip. So if I'm coming into a tricky area, I just can slide on the handles, and I can also slide up and hold on the wing like this. It's very easy to change position and work in technical areas with this snath. It's really the best one. The rotational stiffness is usually a little bit weaker than in a normal Austrian snath as we adopt the dimensions. The material is ash tree as in the Austrian snath, and the weight is usually a little bit more light than the Austrian as we adopt the dimension here depending on the length of the snath. The attachment of the blade to the snath is basically the same as in the Austrian. We use this plastic piece, we use the same ring, so it's easy to pull back the ring below the holes, mount the blade and come up with a ring. But we have a different solution here with a metal plate that's stretched all the way along to the tip. It means that the tang stays really close to it all the way, and we will never have any problem with the tang eating into the tree here. We also have 2 different holes making it a little bit easier to adjust the hafting angle in a wider range, and also like the actual length of the snath you can adopt a little bit. But these small holes also means that on a normal Austrian blade you need to grind down the knob a little bit. When we sell snath and blade together, we always ground it down for you. This is what I call an Eastern Europe snath, and it's a very easy model and used throughout like Eastern Europe, and it's just a straight snath with one lower handle. The height of the upper handle is really non-existent, as there is no upper handle, so you can place your hand just wherever you want on the snath that feels comfortable. The positioning of the handles here are not really ideal, I would say, because this angle from the upper hand to the lower hand doesn't differ so much from the snath angle. So it means that I need to like lower my right hand a little bit. This type of snath is often used in high grass together with a quite long blade and with a more Eastern Europe style of mowing, when you often like raise the blade a little bit at the start of the stroke, come down firmly to the ground, do the stroke. Often that's not so wide but pretty narrow and deep stroke, and then often go up a little bit at the end. So this means that you don't need to stay close to the ground during all the stroke. So it's a little bit more like adopted to that type of mowing style. The design of handles. On this upper one, there is no really handle, but I still can have my wrist pretty straight, and usually I work with the hand from underneath, but I can also place my hand like upper here. This lower handle is more or less exactly the same as on the Nordic Snath, so I would say it's really convenient. The rotational stiffness is pretty weak on this one, but as I tend to recommend to use this on plain areas with easy cut grass and not so high ground pressure, not in tricky areas, we don't need to apply so much ground pressure, and therefore we don't need to have the same stiffness like this in this type of model. This is also made of ash tree, and I would say this is really lightweight, as we can scale down the dimensions even more a little bit, as it's just a straight snath. And regarding attaching the blade and the hafting angle, this is exactly the same principle as for the Nordic Snath. So if you live in Sweden and find an old snath in your barn, it's very likely to be out of this model. Height of the upper handle. As you see, this is really low. It's hardly up to my armpit. This means I need to really bend my knees a lot or curl my back a little bit to reach down. Positioning of the handles. I would say this is really bad on this snath, as the angle through the hands really aligns with the snath. So this means when I'm standing like this, I need to have an angle on my arms like this, really lower my shoulder and keeping this elbow raised. So it's a really uncomfortable position actually. Another way of showing this is that if I place myself in a nice and comfortable position with my body and the hands, I see that the end of this snath is maybe 40 centimeters above the ground. Not good. The shape of the handles, I really actually like them pretty much, as they come up a little bit like this and then go forward. So yeah, it rests really nice in the hands actually. And as with many old snath, the handles are loose, but it's often possible to tighten them up. The weight of this snath is really high comparing to its length. You see this is really over-dimensioned. This means also the rotational stiffness is not an issue here. It will for sure be stiff enough. The attachment of the blade to the snath. As with many old snath, there are often some kind of homemade solutions here. And with the Swedish old type of attachment, there was usually an attachment ring that had one screw coming from above with a screw. Like this. That's why they always needed to have a metal plate here on the upper side, otherwise the screw would just tighten right into the wood. This is more or less a similar snath. As you see, it's really too short, and the handles are placed in an angle aligning with the snath, and they are even more loose. They are also even more just pointing forward, which means that I have a not as comfortable positioning on my hands. It's really heavy, oversized, and also this attachment here with 2 bolts and 1 thick metal plate all the way around is super heavy. It also has this classical Swedish attachment of a ring that have bolts that does not go on the tang, which means the hafting angle with really easy change if you hit a stump or something, as it's just metal towards metal here, no bolts into. And this scythe setup is like a textbook example of how they look when you found them in a barn in Sweden. You see, this is an old grinding scythe, of course, and the lay is always set so it's more or less aligned with the snath. It should be down like this, I would say. Otherwise you need to go like really on your knees to find a nice angle here, a nice lay of the blade. And this is not how we want to stand when mowing. And this is another scythe from the barn, and as you see, it's too short for me. But this is a little bit more delicate actually, as the handles are more up and forward. They are more thin, they are nice to hold on, and the position of the handles is actually, with this one, a little bit high up. So you see the snath is curved down here. So it means that I don't need to stand really as much as this, but a little bit raised. The thickness of the snath is also a little bit more delicate, so makes it a little bit more lightweight. And this is the old type of Swedish ring where you have 1 screw from above, which is a really stupid solution, I would say, because you just have metal to metal here, and the friction is low, so it means that you need to secure the hafting angle from not angle up by putting in some wooden wedges here or something. And that's really annoying in the long run when you just want to adjust the hafting angle just a little, for example, or removing the blade and put it on again. And this is a metal snath that is sold very, very commonly in Sweden since many years. And this is probably the most common snath in Sweden. It's the only one that it's not made of wood, and it's sold for many years. Height of the upper handle is close to my shoulder joint, so it's actually quite good. Now it's with a blade on, so actually it's a little bit lower. The design of handles, it's very simple. It's just like a simple tube, and it's going straight forward. So with my right hand I can have more or less straight handle, but look at my left hand. It comes like this. It's super inconvenient position. And regarding the weight, I would say it's pretty okay actually. It's not super heavy. And as it's a metal, the rotational stiffness and the stiffness itself is really, really well. That's good. And looking on the attachment here, the snath should come together with a ring adopted to the snath. Usually they have screws with a square hole in them that usually get rounded, and I just say good luck with find a new ring that is adopted to this snath with a square hole. Now I've used a ring made for the Nordic and Austrian Snath, but that's too high, so needed to put a distance here. And you see, it's just it's not a delicate solution. And this is a very delicate formed snath from the absolute northern Sweden, and it has some interesting things I will tell you about. First of all, regarding the height of the upper handle, yes, this must be for someone who are much shorter than me. And looking at the position of the handles, if drawing this line between the handles, it's not really aligned with the snath. It comes a little bit up here. That is good. So imagine myself being in the height of someone suitable for this snath. It's more or less a comfortable position. I would say I would have liked the lower handle up a little bit, but not so much actually. And the design of handles, it's especially the upper that is really interesting. It's more like a spade, you know. But I think I would have quite a good drag here with the left hand, just curling my fingers around. And this one is designed for just pushing. It's a little bit edgy here. It could have been raised a little bit more, and feels easy also to mow in more tricky areas with this one. And as you see, it has a quite thick dimension here, but as it's made of a very lightweight spruce, the Snath itself is super light. This means also the rotational stiffness is really good, as the dimension is pretty thick. And the attachment here has a really interesting solution. It's really lightweight actually, because the only metal here is this ring that is of pretty thin material, and you stick the blade with this wedge that you hammer down, and if you have some wedges here, you can also control the hafting angle. Okay, so now let's test a couple of these equipments. And to be honest, I would say like 98% of the result is not due to the Snath. It's due to the blade and the angles. And they are not grinded and honed. They are just taken as they are from the barn. And just to show you how I as a professional can perform with this one just taken out from the barn. Now, to set the example, I would just first repeat what the scything can look like when you have a sharp blade with the correct angles and you have a good snath that is adapted to your length. Okay, this is a challenge, I would say. It's a really low snath. I need to go like this, and I know this blade is also, it's really straight, so it's really easy to get stuck in the ground. Well, let's see. Oh yeah, I'm able to cut some grass at least. I need almost to hold it in front of me like this, just to get a big hub rotation like this to get a decent cutting angle. It's surprisingly good actually, I would say. It's pretty sharp. Otherwise I couldn't cut a single straw. I'm really surprised how good this works actually, despite the hafting angle and everything. But actually now when I see, I put on this blade just before we recorded here, and this is my example grinding blade, and actually this is super sharp. So that's why it turned out so good anyway. So now this is the very short snath from the north of Sweden, and let's see how this performs. Oh! I need to go with a lot of power to strike through this one. Yes, it's possible, even though the blade is not super sharp. But it has a pretty good lay though. I would have done much better if it was super sharp, of course. But I'm exhausted just by doing this one with this model and this sharpness. And the result is, yeah, you see, not so good. So I hope you learned something about Snath models and I not made you even more confused. If you want to learn more about scything and the basics, please watch my tutorial videos here and subscribe to the channel.